The other way.
Oh, it wasn't the first slide. I see.
There we go.
Oh, I have 2 times. Hello.
Hi.
Let's start the talk now. This talk is called Patch Me Up, and it is about a game that 3 of us made that's also called Patch Me Up. We'll do proper introductions, but just for namesakes, this is
Jillian.
and I am Jesse, and this is
Sebastian.
So let's do table of contents. Next slide. Okay. What is this talk about? This talk is about who we are. Getting there. We're going to be talking about cyberpunk as a genre. We're going to be talking about deconstructing it, reconstructing it, subverting it, exploding it, and ultimately strangling it and leaving its lifeless body on the tiled floor of our co-working space. So to get to that, we need to talk about our credentials. And we're going to start, next slide. Sebastian.
Hello, I'm Sebastian. My pronouns are they, them. I am the technical answer on Patch Me Up. That means build the best and I make robots safe. I'm a multimedia artist, specializing in textiles, installations, and computing. I wear a lot of hats, hat stands everywhere, all over and I'm also an academic at the Penn State's scare quotes. I don't think I am, but I wrote a paper that was really good and got me to grad school with a bunch of scholarships, so apparently I'm good at this.
Hi, I'm Jesse. I designed parts, a lot of Patch Me Up. I also did the web client interface for the game. I am a designer, primarily a writer. I work in live experiences like escape rooms and immersive theater. That is sort of my jam. And oh, my pronouns are he, them, or they, them.
It's me. My name is Jillian. I use she, her pronouns. I call myself the sewing sorceress. For Patch Me Up, it was built on the back of a denim vest, which required cutting off the sleeves, making like a cool back panel, and attaching all the fun electronics to said vest. So I spent a lot of time sewing electronics to things, or hot gluing things, or sticking things with prayers, hopes and dreams, maybe a little bit of blood, stabbing myself with the needle. Great. I also helped with the narrative design of projects, so doing like mechanics, fun story for people to engage with as they play it. I do a lot of things, so I'll make a good label for myself. I call myself a multimedia artist all the time. Currently, I'm a digital art educator, still in school, do things, make things, also am witch. Please like to meet us during the thing. It'll be fun.
Okay, so what actually is Patch Me Up? What's this thing we're talking about? Patch Me Up was a game that we created for a jam held by Danes Making Games. Are you familiar with games? Several people are. In case anyone isn't, they are a not-for-profit that operates programming for industry game designers as well as aspiring game designers, writers, coders, everything. They have a broad array of programming for different disciplines as well as even live games, tabletop, stuff like that. They're very cool. Every February for the past 6 Februaries, they have run a jam called Feb Fatale, where they sort of invite their membership to make a game that responds to a different form, like a noir theme often. And this year, the 6th year of Feb Fatale, the subtitle was Killing Cyberpunk. And their brief was to create a game that really wrestled with not only cyberpunk's origins as a genre historically, but also how those origins have traveled and what the genre has become in 2019 with a really critical eye to encouraging. We, as designers, as members of the organization coming to this jam, we wanted to make a multiplayer game because those were fun. And we wanted to use a mixture of different forms of technology, input, and textiles because that is sort of what our specialty is. I think. Next slide. Yeah.
2 tabs.
Yeah.
Inspiration. We were inspired by several things to make this game. Firstly, a talk called Mending Technology by Santo Apiro. They gave this talk.
That was at Damage Camp, September 2018, I believe.
Yes. And this talk was about like the kind of damaging tropes that cyberpunk has and how we can deconstruct it. So talking about the inherent colonialism in cyberpunk, unpacking classism within augmented bodies. So they discussed like who gets to have augmented bodies in cyberpunk generally and who do they benefit. Often we augment the lower class in these narratives to have better labor. That's capitalism, and the upper class doesn't need them because they have an augmented working class to do it for them. Another thing we were inspired by is a game called Space Team. It's a fun game to play with friends on your phone where you get to yell nonsensical instructions at each other about how to fly a spaceship under pressure. So this is a screenshot of that game. As you can see, none of those things need anything by themselves. Yeah, so the instruction is to soak the ferrous hollow spectrum. Then you have to find that fun device on your phone. You might have to read the instructions to someone, but you don't have the ability to do that, so you're relying on your team members to push the button when you tell them to, or else you will get asteroids. And, yeah. So that kind of like idea of just making nonsense words that aren't intuitive, and the idea of giving instructions to someone who is looking at something different, help inform the interface for our games to like the back of the jacket. And the last thing we were inspired by is called In Tune, which is a game by Allison Cole, Jess Marcotte, and Zachariah Smith. It's an alt-controller 2-player game about navigating consent, specifically about like touching each other consensually, and it informs how cooperation and consent could work using body-centered controllers for our games. So let's have murder cyberpunk.
That's actually our.
I know.
As a footnote, Santo's talk is available online for free. You should watch it and then give Santo money. Anyway, even though it's free. It's really good talk. So we want to talk about cyberpunk and modern aesthetics. What's wrong with cyberpunk? We love cyberpunk, or do we? So there are a lot of different great analyses of cyberpunk as a genre of cyborgs and augmented bodies specifically that we'll touch on later in the talk, but specifically I think we want to take more of a globalist approach to our deconstruction of cyberpunk. So as you may know, cyberpunk as a genre is often credited as originating in Japan with works in the 1980s like the manga Akira. And as a result, in the kind of decades afterward, we see that Western depictions of cyberpunk stories, of cyberpunk genres, tend to fall into a trap of Orientalism because of their understanding of cyberpunk as a genre that exists within a Japanese context. So ways that can manifest might be things like gratuitous, like Japanese or Chinese text in a cyberpunk game, or background visual that doesn't really add anything to the world building, isn't explained or isn't discussed or interacted with it. Just they're sort of make the world of the future and technology sounds the world of the other, which is not good and is also bad. Cyberpunk also has been ground to a lot of critiques and allegations of ableism, especially with what Jillian talked about earlier about the depictions of body augmentations are really common in cyberpunk, and they're often, I think the word I would really hang upon is thoughtless. I think people depict cyberpunk, they, the meme with the guy like looking at like a gear and it like literally goes over his head. They get caught up in really cool lights and light cycles in robots with flashing sword arms, and they don't necessarily understand that when you depict a modification of a human body, what you're often depicting can be this disability. And And I think that these stories often fail to connect with disability or disability movements in a thoughtful, a coherent, or often a sympathetic way. And that can lead to a really negative depiction in the genre as a whole. Cyberpunk also tends to have some imperialist themes, especially more generally in its depictions of like destructions of cities, countries, places as a backdrop for the cool actions of the protagonist and the antagonist having an amazing battle. There's a lot of mystification or obfuscation of where technology was sourced from, who is developing technology, the labor that goes into the development of technology is only used for like either weird stroking evil plot purposes or just to highlight how cool it is, as opposed to unpacking how technology can actually impact adversely or positively a society. That's the story. Yeah. Those are the things I just said. Good. I like mashed all the slides together. Here are some things I'm thinking about. I literally Googled cyberpunk costume the other day because I was like, what would that look like? And you can go on Amazon.com, not today or yesterday or any day out there, but you can find like things that are just branded as a cyberpunk costume, which is so decontextualized and divorced from any kind of like meaning or understanding of like this genre as any kind of cultural critique, that it's just a jacket that has buckles and straps on it, is what cyberpunk has been reduced to in a lot of popular imagination. Cyberpunk 2077, if any of you have heard of this upcoming CD Projekt Red game, has been pretty roundly criticized, especially given its latest showing at E3. Really unfortunate depictions of bodies, transphobic depictions of bodies, real unwillingness to engage with labor or with class in a meaningful way, other than letting their hero shoot more interesting kinds of future guns at people. It's not very subtle, it's not very nuanced, and it doesn't really reflect or speak to where cyberpunk originates as a genre. So maybe it's time for cyberpunk to die.
Aesthetically, what did we do to counteract that?
What did we do aesthetically to counteract that? We focused primarily on the interaction between two people. We tried to, in fact, make the world building very minimal so that the experience focused largely on the interaction you have with the other player. It's kind of funny. You spend the game, if you want to assume the position. One person in catching up is holding a computer and reading the instructions of how to repair their malfunctioning body on. The second player is actually adjusting the body out. The second person is aware. So it does get into, like we talked about, into issues and conversations about consent, about working on each other, about self-care and care for our communities, about the kind of vulnerability and risk in that interaction that, again, is really present in a lot of cyberpunk depictions. So we tried to find, I think, like the softer side of cyberpunk in a genre that's so like battle-hardened and scruffy that needs like a little bit more tenderness to really flourish as something that can have any sort of dialogue attached to it.
You ever seen like a denim jacket and be like, damn, that looks cool? It is cool. Denim is punk, DIY, scavenge thing. It's very punk. Denim's really durable too, so.
Yeah, Santos Talk has a really good point about how a lot of the depictions of like these gritty cyberpunk heroes look like their suits cost $1 bajillion, and that all their odds and everything are like so expensive that having like a working class person afford this, it's a fantasy for like the ludicrously rich to have all this technology. So our jacket is sort of deliberately crummy, can I say that?
Yes.
It is held together with like scotch tape and straight pins to kind of give the effect of like this is something that someone bought, had to keep working for 20 years longer than the warranty intended, and then like hold it together in their basement because it was the thing that was keeping their lungs going.
Great.
That's still
No. Sebastian will start, don't worry. And maybe they do. So asymmetrical gameplay here is referring to that dynamic. So when Jesse and I were demonstrating, right, one person has the computer the instructions and they're giving that to the person who can see the back of the jacket. The person wearing the jacket has no idea what's back there and certainly can't reach to make those modifications themselves. So if any of you have ever played Mario Party, then you definitely have played some asymmetrical games, like any of the 1v3 stuff. Absolutely, you can chomp all your friends out of the arena. It's great. Some popular examples would be like Dead by Daylight, betrayal at House on the Hill, and Keep Talking and No One Explodes. So any situation where the players have different roles or mechanics or even access to different information would be what asymmetrical gameplay is. And for us, what we wanted to do was create a scenario where people had to talk to each other, so that asymmetry creates this dependency that the characters have on each other. And that creates those moments of caring, intimacy, and consent that really grounded this project. Or gifts.
Yeah, one thing to add, and inspirations that we took from Space Team, and a way to unify asymmetric play is make sure everyone's confused. Because knowledge is power, and knowledge, if there is dynamics of someone having more knowledge than the other, it creates that uneven barrier. So by both people playing the game, just about what they're looking at, what's happening, it helps encourage those dialogues of like people describing what they're seeing on the back of the jacket, people trying to read out like word for word. There's the greatest moments of two people trying to do a math problem together, like a basic math problem, and getting their friends to come in like, how do we do this basic math thing? Because like confusion is a thing we all experience, and it really brings us together.
It levels the playing field for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as we kind of touched on a bit already, is the idea of wearable tech ability. And wearable tech is always this very interesting thing. A lot of people get excited about it because it gives us this temporary experience with having an augmented body. So it's like I get to be a cyborg for an hour and have this cool stuff over. It's super fun. But the thing is, as we're moving forward and having a lot of body-centric technologies, there needs to be awareness in building them on the bodies that are going to be interfacing with them and the bodies that are going to be on them. That's a thing that we try to keep in mind if building the best. We wanted something that was like bigger so that fit on different bodies. We wanted something that took the sleeves off as one, very cool. Two, also, and it allowed a lot more mobility so people can freely taking the best on and off. You have to think about the bodies in this technology because so much like disabled people are left out of technology constantly, despite the fact that cyborg technologies are immediately co-opting disabled tech that already exists. So it's we kind of have this frustration of like seeing people create these really cool augmentations. Oh, people's got a really cool cyborg arm in like new media, but you're having trouble getting just functioning prosthetic legs. So like you have to be mindful of these bodies that we're looking for and who's going to be interacting with them. So yeah, like this is a huge thing when it comes to cyberpunk, when it comes to the concept of a cyborg and who gets to be a cyborg. You have to be mindful of these bodies that are getting outfitted. As well, when destructing cyberpunk and thinking about augments and thinking about how class plays in with ability, a lot of the more lower class people in cyberpunk get these augments so they can be functional workers. And that's a place where you have to intersect with disability justice, and that a lot of people need like mobility aids and things just to get around, but as well people see them as ways to be more functional workers, to be more productive workers, to prove their worth, and we need to be mindful of that and how we interpret that and how we want to represent that. Because if not, we're just co-opting things because they look better. That's not a place that we want to be in. And as well, improving non-worker bodies in genre text. There's a lot that can be said already now in how trans people and disabled people are modifying their bodies, or augmenting their bodies, or biohacking. And we look forward and we look into these, this media that disrespects them completely, like Cyberpunk 2077, that makes a lot of people upset, makes me upset personally, and just need to be really take away the neon lights and the shiniest and really get to the nitty-gritty of the nitty-gritty inside of what it's saying and what bigger means that it wants us to think about. Oh. I can speak on this.
You have a good anecdote. I want you to tell it. Well, I know on a lighter note.
Yeah, on a lighter note, one thing that came out of testing things on having people is a fun thing that I know. Butt stuff is a feature, not a bug. So one thing we can plan out in the vest is we have a hole at the bottom for a photon receptor, where people have to shine a flashlight into the bottom of the vest. We didn't realize how long the vest is, it's right on the butts. So as people were starting to test it out, they're like, oh, I have to put this in someone's butt. Oh no. As a result, people have started having the most adorable conversations about this. They're like, so I have to put a flashlight here now. Are you okay with this? They're like, we have to put it's like in the photon receptor, it's at your butt. They're like, it's my first time. And it's like, there was so many conversations about that. And it was goofy and silly. But it's also showed that it really encouraged people to have those conversations around consent and bodies, which is what we wanted to come out of this. And we wanted to have people have these caring conversations about intimacy, but also goofy intimacy with another person's body in something that's supposed to be vulnerable. So like, it came out in a goofy way, joking about that. But it actually happened through like a mistake with the vest that people had these conversations. And unprompted had them on their own as well, and like not have these fun, silly conversations.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how our analysis of cyberpunk stories themselves don't have to be like totally grim dark, and there is space for levity, and that levity can lead to those conversations. Like I think if we had been very like serious and focused, you know, like shoulders and upper vertebrae kind of thing, people who are, say we're already friends and we're playing this game together, and I know I can touch your shoulder, and we're both touching each other's shoulders, we don't necessarily have that conversation and get to work on our relationship as friends if I don't get to ask you about your butt and where my hands can go vis-a-vis your butt. So I think that, yeah, well, I just think that ultimately, like, it allowed for even groups that were very comfortable already with the realm and dimension of the game. It made sure that everyone had a moment where they were like, I do actually have to think about how I interact and act upon another person's body because that's important, that's paramount. And just because someone's my friend, my sister, my wife, my whatever, doesn't mean that I can put my hand on their butt. That's been it. Thank you so much for cutting me off.
No problem. I know we got overtime. But just some final thoughts to leave you with. That disabled peoples are experts about their own bodies and their own needs. And this asymmetrical gameplay that we created mimics this situation where, you know, the player has attached their own body augmentation to avoid things like medical surveillance and other hassles, which emphasizes the DIY aspect, which is fun. And B, their partner wants to be involved in care and is therefore being led and instructed by the actual expert and not medical anything. There's no paternalistic relationship that we created here. If you would like to do any further reading on this topic, we recommend 70s Cyberpunk Forever and Game by Cento of Europe on the internet, and the article Common Cyborg by Jillian, which breaks down Cyborg Manifesto and how cyborg identity theory comes from the perspective of the disabled cyborg.
And if you want to play this game and touch your friend's butts, it's going to be showcased this weekend at the Big on Lure Festival with the James Making Games space. So come check it out, come wear the jacket, and come enter a new cyberpunk. Woo! Woo!
Where's this space on board?
I don't know yet. Do you know where it is?
Yeah, so the DMG tent is going to be at North Rock, right the southeast
You
corner.
really know.
I have a map, because I'm doing another event there, so.
Southeast corner of Florida Rock, Saturday afternoon. Be there.
Right in the book. Touch your friend's buttons.
Other questions? Sorry, I have a question. Yeah, I was just wondering how the origin story, like how you guys got together and when it was. Seems like you each have different skill sets and backgrounds, and it just seems like such an interesting and focused project. Justin and I collaborated on a couple things. We went to school together, studying film, drama, and digital media, and met you through James Making Games. I knew that Sebastian was really skilled with Arduino and mixing Arduino or like textiles and games and that kind of thing. So I really wanted to make some kind of body controller for this event. It's like, Sebastian, if you like to please make a game with me.
Sebastian's in the middle of GradX, and we just dived into bubble tea. We sat down and we're like, this has to happen, has to be the coolest thing ever. And yeah, we built it in 48 hours. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, it's like 12 hours,
Yeah.
6 hours each day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, is there, I guess I have some friends who are really super excited lately about the idea of using interactive, sort of experiential things for policy, like instead of creating like a boring policy paper at the end, like, you know, making something that people can play and like learn about what, like, is there, I don't know, like, I'm curious whether you see any possibility in like working with policy people or maybe people like that. It's sort of like working.
I find it really inspired by the person whose name is Nikki Case. So the person who does the like online kind of like thought experiments about like democracy and like elections and kind of like diagrams and those interactive kind of modes. I think where this can come in is where it's difficult because you don't ever want to get to a place where people are role-playing disability in a way that is appropriative and doesn't speak to the actual like needs or intentions of single people. But on the other hand, I think there is a space where a more experiential or in-depth or dynamic understanding of where society is failing. It's disabled citizens where maybe interesting technologies come in, help people realize and better understand. I think especially with the outcomes of their policy decisions.
I mean, that is definitely a thing. In that case, it's good to have someone experiences do comments on that. I see others with disabilities, close to home project. And honestly, I think, especially sensitivity consultants, having people that speak on it, just chip in. But I think there's a lot. I think through interaction, some people understand it, or you just have to.
Thanks.